Joan Dennis.
And we're on our third episode of Between Apartheid and John Hughes. This episode, we're going to be talking about the Hill-Thomas hearings because this week, actually yesterday, this was the 13th. So on the 11th was when Anita Hill appeared before the Senate hearing about the nomination of Clarence Thomas to the Supreme Court. So
30 years ago.
30 years ago. We still look good, Chris, for 30.
We do. You're right, but it's just like when I realized 30 years
ago.
And sis, you got the teal on. You're representing.
Yes, when I chose this top, I didn't think about the connection between Hill and what I'm wearing, even though I was watching the documentary about Anita Hill on Amazon Prime. But then I'm like, you know what? I am going to wear this. It's warm, which is what I want to be today because it's a little chilly out here in Philadelphia, but also Anita. So Dr. Hill.
Exactly.
Dr. Hill,
so
first of all.
I also need to show people I have from 30 years ago.
Yes.
I believe Anita Hill.
Yes.
30 years. So this was an important moment for me.
It was an important moment for me too. When the way it came through in my life was I was the co-coordinator of the Women's Center at my undergraduate school. When the hearings were going on, and I was enraged, just enraged. I think part of it was because I too am a survivor of sexual violence. Mine's happened when I was 5 years old, and it was at the hands of a Black man. So, and I also knew over the years that as much as we talked about the interracial violence, the alleged and real interracial sexual violence between Black people and white people over the centuries, what I also knew was that far too often the perpetrator and victim were intra-racial.
Yes.
So when I saw Hill and I saw Thomas, I thought not only was this messed up, but I also knew, and I believed Anita Hill because I knew that her perpetrator would have been her own race. It would not have been some white man, and that which would have added this whole veneer of, see, they do this to our women. It's like, no, we do it to our women as well, more so than anyone else. Yeah. So that's how I saw Anita Hill. Yeah. And what happened was during the hearings, the local newspaper from one city over where I was born at in Toledo, the Toledo Blade called up the Women's Center, because I guess they had a long relationship, and they asked us for a quote. So I was there and I gave my quote and I said, you know what? I believe Anita Hill. And not only do I believe Anita Hill, I want to give her flowers because of her speaking up and telling the truth about what happened to her. And then we went back and we had to do an official comment from the Women's Center because it was actually a student group. But I remember distinctly doing that. So again, very much I thank Anita Hill for what she did. Till this day, I still thank her for what she has done.
Yep. Oh, so much to unpack when I think, when I was thinking about doing this, I was thinking about where I was. So it was my last, so I was supposed to have graduated in May of 91, but I was a super senior, was taking the long route, and it was actually taking a sociology of gender class.
Okay.
And for me, you know, my feminism, and we haven't talked about this, but I'm sure that we're going to talk about this. And but I know that, Andrea, you know this, that my feminism really came from actually lesbians of color, specifically Black and brown lesbians. Like, so for me, my feminism has always been centered on women of color, has always been about, you know, now that doesn't mean that I haven't engaged with white feminists and stuff like that. And
right.
But for me, it was like, it's always been intersectional. And So I was actually with my first long-term partner, and we were driving to Montreal because it was the the holiday formerly known as that colonizer from Italy.
Yes,
Yes.
that
Um,
one.
but yeah, that one. But we were driving to Montreal because people may know that in Montreal, in Canada, that weekend is actually Thanksgiving. Their Thanksgiving
Yes,
is in October. So we were going to visit friends in Montreal to spend Thanksgiving with, to go clubbing and things like that. And so we
right.
were driving from Boston, and the whole time um, listening to the hearings. And I just remember, I had seen her on TV, and I
Yes.
knew here is this woman who I could tell instantly she didn't want to be doing this.
No.
Um, that I believed this woman. I knew this woman went through what she did because in order to go through what she was going through, and I just remember the images of this very conservative. And when I say conservative, I'm not meaning that her politics, but she was a very conservative, meaning that she was circumspect. She wasn't,
Yes.
and Anita Hill has always said that about herself. She was from Oklahoma. She wasn't, bringing attention to herself. So she was this kind of conservative, small C woman, coming
Right.
from Oklahoma, black woman. And just remember all those white men up there. Do you
Yes.
remember those images of just like them looking down with Uncle Joe being the first one, and them
He
just
was the one
looking,
that coordinated. He was the one that
yes,
coordinated that hearing.
and just looking down at her and just being like really, really bothered by that. Um,
Right.
I also remember, and I know that we want to get into this about how frustrated I was because I think that the Republican Party was brilliant in that we weren't as sophisticated with our understanding around diversity. So diversity is just like
Yes.
we're going to put someone in who's part of an identity category. I think at that time we thought, oh, it's best that we are represented, and rather than who is that person representing us. And
Right.
I remember there
Exactly.
being people who I really respected, like Dr. Maya Angelou, who supported Clarence Thomas because we need a black person there. And George H.W. Bush did that on purpose because he said, "Oh, what are the
Yes.
liberals going to say? Are they going to go against a black person?"
Yes.
And I
Because
was like, and I remember at that time, lots of us were like, "Yeah, you know,
yes.
is that person going to be there for black people's interests?" I now believe, I think that there was a naivete with those people. I think what they thought were, he's going to get there and he's not going to be as bad as we think. That
Yes.
ultimately, black people can't be that conservative and things like that. I
Yes.
think that, and I get that. I think I have more empathy, and I think because you and I were 22 and we were just enraged and we were pissed off at our elders and we were like, "You're
Yes.
stupid," blah blah blah. Like these people, but like I now understand that at that time we hadn't seen people like Herman Cain and
Right.
um who's the Ben Carson and things like that, like the real
Yes.
real right wing. Like they were like, okay, they're conservative, but they're not going to be that bad.
They were conservative with small C's.
But he was that bad. Like
He
he
was.
was. And I
Yep.
just I just remember, and I'll never forget the New York Times when all those black women came out. Do you remember that with the advertisement saying that and that was one of the first times I remember where it really was about people standing um, in opposition to each other.
Shit.
Yeah.
Hey. Okay. Um, so I actually have I actually printed out the African American Women in Defense of Ourselves Proclamation. And
Yes.
it was 1600 women, black women, who signed on to this huge, it was beautiful. Actually, it was, I still look at that and my heart just still leaps for joy. That's co-signed to this document that basically said that we stand with Anita Hill.
Mm-hmm.
What happened, the history of that was, it was three Black academics. Let me get those names really quick. They were, yes, I'm rustling my notes here. That's professional. They were Dr. Elsa Barkley Brown, Barbara Ransby, and Deborah King. Basically did a phone tree with their friends and their friends and their friends. And then they actually set up a 1-800 number where Black women could call in and say, I want to be a part of this declaration and this proclamation. And they would donate whatever they could. Author Tayari Jones said that she donated $25 and got her name on there too. And wow. They raised $50,000, and they bought a full page ad in the New York Times. Yep. And that's where that appeared. And it also appeared in 7 Black newspapers as well.
And that was huge. You and I know that. Like, that was huge because it was this kind of public disagreeing.
Yes.
Among Black people. And we know that, especially, you know, if we think that was only 25 years after kind of desegregation, you know, so there was still this like, oh, we don't quite know, you know, it's, of course, a community that has been segregated, there's going to be fear, like, what's going to happen?
Right. And then we started self-policing. You don't air your dirty laundry like that. And so Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill became I don't want to say the first, but I think the most seen of that airing. Because remember, before that, we talked about this, and I think in our first episode, where we had Black men going after Alice Walker and her book, The Color Purple.
Right.
So there was that, but it was also it was public, but it wasn't it wasn't such a mass media event as the hearings were. Yes. And people went after Anita Hill for airing that dirty laundry. Yep. Orlando Peterson was trying to say, I'll call him an author. Yeah. I just think he's gross. But anyway, Orlando Peterson tried to say tried to justify what Clarence Thomas did to Anita Hill by saying that he was doing some like old-fashioned Southern working class courting of her, and she was basically acting white, and that's why she didn't accept his advances. And it's like, who raised you, Orlando? Who raised you to think that was okay? But it was that justification. Yeah. And why didn't Anita Hill just let that ride? And I know people in my life who's tried to say the same thing. She should have let that ride. Or it was Anita Hill was not the strong Black woman. Why did she let that man cow her? And when I would have told her off and da 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 da. And it's like, well, that's not Anita Hill. Let's be 100.
Well, and also those people who say that.
Yeah.
It's easy to say that when you have not dealt with that. Like, it's just easy.
Or if you dealt with it, but you dealt with it in your own way. Everybody ain't you. That's the reality.
Go figure.
Everybody,
yes.
So Anita Hill was not going to do the same thing that you did. Anita Hill handled it the way that she could. And she said this in the documentary. She said, I loved what I did. I loved working with the EEOC, because I think one of the senators asked her, why did you follow him if he did all this to you? She said, because I loved the work. And he said, and she said, really what I wanted it to do is I wanted it to stop. And for a while it did. Now, she said, now, why am I speaking now when I should have spoken then? I don't think I have an answer that would satisfy you. But I also know, and I probably shirked my responsibility for not speaking up back then. But I'm speaking up now because this man is going to be sitting in one of the most powerful seats in the United States. And morally, this man is bankrupt.
Right. Well, and it's also what's interesting when I was thinking about, you're right about, like some people handle it differently, but it's also the circumstances when people have spoken about, was it, where was it? Was it in a church or was it, like what were the
It
power
was some one-on-one at
differences?
work. It could have been
And
at church. It was these smaller spaces where you're not having like 5 billion cameras and the entire world looking at you as you're trying to say about a potential Supreme Court Justice of the United States nominee that this man harassed you.
right,
That's the difference.
exactly,
And
exactly.
again, with Anita Hill's disposition and like you said, her temperament, that's just not her.
And
And it's
that's
not,
also
and it
blaming
still
the
isn't
victim.
her.
It's also blaming the victim. And I
It
think
very
lots
much
of
is
people
blaming the
want to
victim.
say, I would not do that because then it's like, then see, therefore, because it either hasn't happened to me or when I did do that, it stopped. See, I was able to control it and other people can't. It's more about like, and that says more about the person speaking. That
Right.
it's like, okay, and I get that. I'm just like, okay. But yeah, so she did. And that is the pattern of abusers. They do
Yes.
that. They stop for a while and then they don't, and it's a little bit and you're just like, and she shouldn't have had to stop and been like, I'm going to change my career
Yes.
because I
Yes.
and as a black woman who's in the legal profession doing civil rights, where else would she have gone?
Thank you. Especially for that kind of job.
Yeah, like I mean, in the 80s, like
Yes. Into the 90s.
yeah, there
So
wasn't. Yeah,
there wasn't those kind of opportunities. There weren't diversity, DEI positions
right.
as they are today. So
Exactly.
she went where she could. And one of her co-witnesses said in the documentary, her mama probably told her, don't leave when you leave your job, don't leave with enemies because you never know when you might need them again. And so she said that's probably what Anita Hill did, was that she probably left trying not to make waves because she didn't know if she needed this man again. Come to find out she ended up needing him again to work at the EEOC.
Yep.
Okay.
No, my mother said the same thing. Don't burn bridges
Don't burn
because you never
bridges.
know.
Right. Right. So, and that's what Anita Hill did.
Yeah.
But again, there was, I mean, even interracially, there's a lot of people who are blaming her. How dare you? How could you let that black man, how could you do that to that black man? Regardless of whether this black man was qualified, regardless whether this black man had the collective interests of black folks at heart and was going to make rulings along those lines. It did not matter. He was a black man. He was replacing Thurgood Marshall. We needed him there. And so it goes back to the idea of when we talk about representation, are we just talking about we just want the visuals? Or are we talking about we want somebody who also has the politics and the visuals? Because just because you're black doesn't mean, and we're finding this out.
Oh, and we found that was the first step in finding that out the hard way. For 30 years, we've been finding
Yep,
that out.
yep, yep. And I think it kind of goes back to the idea of affirmative action and what the Republicans played on was that the original idea around affirmative action was to simply make sure that the people, the marginalized and minoritized people who were qualified for the jobs could get into those
Right.
jobs. Not that we wanted any old minoritized person to be in those jobs,
But
but
that
some, but somehow, some way, the Republicans and the GOP and a lot of cynical people, outside of that particular party, twisted that and said, well, it shouldn't matter as long as we got any old black person, it should be okay. And that also undermined the objectives of affirmative action too. So there was a several prong attack that Clarence Thomas was able to represent.
For
So
me, I've always said that what you just described actually was a cynical ploy by white people to
yes,
say, because what they would do is we'll just put any black person there and
mm-hmm,
then not support them, not
right.
really
Or
look at whether they're qualified. They
Right.
won't work out. And then we'll say, see, we tried.
We
And then they
tried.
give up.
Right. Or he failed up.
So it's like, you know what? It's to me, I'm like, and that's where it's like, no, you don't care. You've never cared. So don't even try to tell me that. Yeah, but you're right. That has been, I mean, I mean, when we think about that case,
Yes.
so much. I mean, for me, that really was, I mean, I had done marches for abortion,
Yep.
was huge about that. But there was something about that case that really said to me, like, that was I don't know, it was just probably it gave us permission, you know, like you and I, you know, being told, you know, not airing dirty laundry, that it
Yes.
was like, oh, heck, no, 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 no. Because especially if what we're trying to do is to have equity and trying to get people in the public eye and try to get people in positions of power, that also means that when people aren't good, we have to be willing to say no. We have to
Yes.
be willing to say, that's not the person for us. That person does not represent us. It
Yep.
also was, so as I was driving in this morning, I was thinking about our video cast, and I was thinking about, it was also the beginning of the that right wing propaganda machine. Because do you remember
Yes.
that book by, I think his name was David Brock, and he
Uh,
wrote this like she was this insane, excuse the ableist term, woman and stuff like
yes.
that. But then when he came out, he came out as gay and real and said like it was like that first of those just like
He's a horrible.
horrible just hit
Yes.
jobs where they
Yes.
just
It was.
lied. They literally just lied in this book. As
Yes.
as as my husband would say, they just lied on that woman. They just lied
They
on that
lied
woman.
on that woman and they played in everybody's faces, as the kids say nowadays.
Yeah.
And David Brock actually came out later when he came out gay, but he also went back and he apologized. He says
Yes. Yes.
he did apologize. He says, I was, I was a willing hack. As
Yep.
I was a willing hack
Yep.
of the vast right-wing conspiracy. He said Hillary Rodham Clinton was not wrong when she said that. It
Yeah.
is vast. And he actually wrote a book called Blinded by the Right that says, let me show you
Yes.
how vast this thing is from
Yep.
top to bottom. It is, it has many tentacles and it has many heads. And let me show you how all of this works. But yes, that was his book.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And again, going back to the Strange Justice book, was that even David Brock tried to slam that book and say that they were wrong. And Abramson and Mayer said, no, no, we did our research. We did our research because we're journalists.
Boom.
David Brock was just a hack.
Boom. Yeah. Boom. We're journalists. We have the
And David Brock is
receipts.
like, yeah, and David Brock has been kind of on a repentance tour ever since. So, but again, it's amazing that once again, it's on this crux of uh intersectional identities and also politics that still have this rippling effect, that we're literally talking about this person, these two people 30 years later, because we've also seen the destruction that this court has created. Because again, like we were saying, it was about somebody replace, let's just get any old Negro up there to replace Thurgood Marshall. Who cares? As long as they're Black, right? But we also started seeing the subtle stacking of the Supreme Court with this. So it was Clarence Thomas. It was also Scalia. They became what was her name? Sandra Day O'Connor, who was conservative.
Yes.
And all of so it became so it just kind of kept going and going, which was, and we have to admit to this, that was part of the right wing strategy
Right.
to stack the court
Right.
until now, to the point that we have this. And let's also talk about how the right wing and the GOP, which is their, the national platform of them, did the same thing with women. Remember, as Hillary Rodham Clinton was running, they said, well, we're going to get a woman too. Any old woman. That's how we got Sarah Palin.
Well, that was his, remember, that was his Hail Mary. They said that was that Hail Mary pass where he didn't even look at who it was.
He didn't care.
It was just like, oh, eeny, meeny, miny, moe, I'm going to pick you.
Yes. Yep.
And it was like, oh.
Stephen Schmidt has regretted that decision ever since.
Because it was
embarrassing.
Oh, it was horrible. I mean, thank goodness that she's just gone. But
unfortunately, though, between
she's even worse. There's even worse now, because before we laughed and we were like, oh, but now these Marjorie Greene people, they're
and we have to put the blame on Clarence Thomas's wife, who is the direct progenitor of the Tea Party movement.
She has gotten, like, maybe I didn't know her politics before. I always knew she was really conservative, but she seems to have gotten just like deranged. Like literally, she buys into. I would not be surprised if she is doing the Pizzagate stories, because she just believes.
No,
yeah, I was going to say, can we please talk about Virginia Thomas, because she.
Yes. And how she reached out to Anita Hill. And if anybody sees the documentary Anita, Speaking Truth to Power, is on Amazon Prime. We can talk about Jeff Bezos, but for right now, that's where it's at. If you can find it somewhere else, groovy. Anita Hill joked, and it was a nice shade that she did. She says, I actually thought when I got that phone call, I thought it was a practical joke, because who else would call your office at 7:30 in the morning? And this woman called her office asking her, and she does that, sweet, genteel, white lady. I'm not this very passive aggressive, wolf in sheep's clothing, Trojan horse bitch kind of maneuver, where she says, oh, I just wanted to know, after all these years, why you did what you did to my husband, and I actually want you to apologize for that.
I know.
And it was like, and I'll be Anita Hill's anger translator. Heifer, what?
Oh, thank you, Heifer. So. What, like?
I don't think so. I do not think so. But again, we can trace this, not trace it. I mean, I'm thinking Virginia Thomas has always been conservative, but also, and I was reading this in the book, Strange Justice, was that Clarence Thomas gets a lot of his information. He filters it through his wife, between the Washington Times, through his wife, and also listens to all of the right-wing radio talk show hosts, such as the late Rush Limbaugh. That's where he gets his news. So he is very much siloed in how he gets his information.
Because he wants power. Clearly, that is what he wanted.
He wanted power. Mm-hmm. And so did his wife.
Yeah, they wanted power, because literally that's why he was, as you said, before, you can tell the audience when you were saying how basically he was talking to the right wing and conservatives. He wanted to be a Supreme Court justice and would be willing to be their patsy.
Yeah, there's two.
Basically, because remember, I mean, do you remember for years, and even now, people were like, he does nothing. He doesn't write opinions. He doesn't even write minority opinions. He's just kind of sits there.
He just sits there. I mean, I think once, and the time that he did write an opinion, it was basically agreeing with the extreme right, not the extreme, but it was a right-wing opinion.
It was something about Black people on a jury. I remember that, and it was just like,
yep.
Okay,
yeah. Really.
Remember when he talked about his sister on welfare? That was my thing. I was like, you know what? There's a special place in hell for you.
I think they're building it. There's like 9 circles according to Dante. I think they're building 10th and 11th, because I think there's a lot of people going to be going there. talk about what he did with his sister, because I think that's another, I think that really speaks to his very curiarchal way that he approaches Black women.
Yes. So what happened for people who don't remember or weren't alive?
Or don't just
Um,
don't know.
yeah, or just don't know. His sister was on welfare. He did not have a close relationship, but literally he would talk about his sister, how she had made poor decisions and how he just basically characterized as like the lazy welfare queen. And, it was horrific that it was, um, even if he were conservative, he could have argued like, wow, this system, disempowered my sister and things like that. Like, I don't agree with that, but like there could have
Right.
been a way. And because actually, so I shouldn't say, I actually do think that the way that the US, well, welfare doesn't exist as it really ever did, but I
No.
do think that there were ways, especially in the 70s and 80s, that the US welfare system really did disempower people. Like, remember, like women could not have men live with them and things like
Yes.
that. And it was and women were like, I mean, I just remember that and being like, so like instead of like wanting people to have, not that marriage is the best, but it's like that you have to get married, but like people were lying. I remember people literally, like
Yes.
men living with women and like lying about it and being like, so then people become liars, and it was bad.
It
So
was
I think,
ugly.
yeah.
And it
And
goes, no,
it
go
wasn't
on.
about it wasn't about empowerment, because we know
No,
the United States government is never going to be about empowering poor people. Like, let's just be
no.
honest.
But and also I think there was a visual element. It kind of goes to the title of Adam Sewer's book, Cruelty is the Point. And I think there's a visual element to the cruelty,
Yes.
because and I'm going to tie this into the ban with Texas, the Texas abortion ban, um, which is, and I had explained this to a couple of people, and I said, how do you know that a woman either had sex or she was raped, or a man raped her? How do you know that if it was an opposite sex situation? How would you know that? She gets pregnant. So if a woman has an abortion, you can never tell if she ever had sex, and therefore you don't have the opportunity to say, oh well, she had sex with this person, and you can't shame her about it. There's a visual element to all of this, and it's the same thing with the quote unquote welfare queen. Remember, it's a very visual idea.
Oh,
She's
yes.
Black, she's very dark skinned. You never see light
Yeah.
skinned women being talked about. She has several kids. You can literally see the kids.
Yeah.
She has these certain material things, like
Yeah.
she's spending so much money on her Cadillac, again a visual idea that has a certain representation,
Yeah.
and she's not living with her man, or she's not married to that man, when the system made sure that they couldn't get married or they
Yeah.
couldn't even cohabitate. So again, you can say she was, and again, that plays into the deeper stereotype
Yes.
of the immoral Black woman. So now we have all the visual quote unquote evidence that this Black woman is immoral. So and so and again, the idea, even with going back to Anita Hill and tying this back to the Anita Hill um and Clarence Thomas case, and they were trying to do the same thing with Anita Hill,
Yes. Oh, yep.
very much trying to paint her again with David Brock, but also what you saw with the way the senators interrogated her and
Oh,
saying, "Are
yes.
you?" This one man was saying, he was actually a Delaware, he was a Democrat from Alabama who was saying, do you think that you are a martyr for the cause? Do you think that you'd be a champion of civil rights by being here today?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
And at this, but it was this Black woman who was literally doing all of this intellectual and emotional labor for all of these white men. Again, the visuals of
Yep.
that.
Yes.
The single Black woman doing all of this labor, not only bringing this bringing her black perpetrator to this court and saying this man is not qualified to be the Supreme Court justice, but also all this wall of white men interrogating her, and she had to explain, and she literally had to explain, as if these men were too, as the kids used to say, how sexual harassment worked. And that was a whole lot to put on a black woman, but that was the expectation of this black woman, is you're going to educate all of us about sexual harassment.
Exactly. Even though we're not going to listen to you, and we're not going to.
Oh, no.
So my point about was that I was trying to say that, like with Clarence Thomas, you know, certainly you and I have known some black folks who are against welfare because they found it disempowering to black people.
Yes.
And I can say, like, okay, cool, like whatever, like that may not be my analysis, but I get that. That was not what he was doing. He was shaming his black sister. He was degrading his black sister. He was buying into white people, what white people think. And that was really the first time for me I saw that. Because for me, and I think, you know, you and I have talked about this, that, you know, there has always been a strain of black conservatism, but that is actually very pro-black. Yes. That is just like, I'm against these white liberal policies because, one, white people have never really cared about black people, and they actually don't really help. So it's like that whole, like black capitalism is going to help. And now you and I may be like, okay, but at least it is from a pro-black perspective. He was the first black person I ever saw that I was like, no, you just buy into what white people think. Like it's not from pro-black. It's like, no, you just buy into what white racist people say. Like your conservatism is no different than William F. Buckley's or anything like that.
Or George Will.
Yeah.
Right. And you exhibit that again with your intra-racial violence towards black women, be it your sister or Anita Hill. And that's what a lot of us, we knew it at the time. We couldn't quite prove it until this man just jumped up and said what he said about his sister. But also, you actually kind of proved it along the way, because you also aren't stopping your wife from doing what she's doing. If you were so pro-black and talk about, this is a high-tech lynching.
How can we forget that? Remember when all of a sudden he was like, I'm different than other black people, and all of a sudden he says high-tech lynching, and I'm like, oh, so now you wanna.
So now you're wrong.
You want to go
right. So you want it both ways. And we know black people who are like that too, who want to use those kind of terms and want to claim, still want to be at the barbecue, but yet you do everything to poison the Kool-Aid and poison the barbecue.
Oh, I love how you just said that. Thank you. Like they want it. It's like, no, you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to do that. Like Candace Owen.
No,
you don't get to. No,
it's not that we're going to say you ain't black.
You're getting paid from white folks right now.
Right. Now,
and I actually don't think that she believes all of her stuff. I think that she's, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if she does. If we're not talking about intention, as we love to say in social justice circles, it's not about your intention. It's not about what's in your heart. It's about your actions, the impact, and the results and the impact. So it doesn't matter if she believes it or not. She's doing it. Huh?
I got one word. What? Omarosa. Remember when all of a sudden after Trump, she's like, oops. And we're like, yeah, sorry. So sad. Too bad.
Right. Stacey Dash. Oops.
Yeah. We don't, you don't get to come back and go, ooh, you knew it all along. We knew you knew it, but guess what? You did damage. You did material damage to black people. Sorry.
And so right. And so we'll give you a plate across the fence, but you got to go home.
Oh, you did not say we'll give you a plate across the fence.
Look, here you go, girl. There you go. Go.
Then, we'll give it to your sister because, she is cool.
Right. But
you're staying back in the car and she'll go give you your plate.
After she's done partying and, playing spades with us for like 12 hours, then she'll come and give you your plate. But no, and I think that's where we as Black folks, people of color, social justice activists of color, that's where we grew up. When we kind of said, you know what, it's more than just you standing there and being Black, or it's just you. If there's more to this than you just being minoritized and getting and just showing up. You know, your identity does not equal your politics.
And
That's
Andrea,
where that's where we're at now.
that's another bridge. Like it's, you know, one of the things I think that's fascinating about this, about our video cast and about our series, is that we're finding that we're this bridge generation, and we were the first ones to kind of find that out. That,
Yes.
you know, that our parents still believed that their identity said something about their politics, and we were the first ones that had a very rude awakening.
Yes. Well, I mean, let's look at the idea of the second wave feminism. You know, the personal is political. Yeah and no. And Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill were the perfect example. Well, Clarence Thomas was a perfect example of that. It's like, no, his personal is not political. Just because he is, and when we mean personal, we mean identity, marginalized identity, such as being a woman, such as being a Black man, such as being a trans person. It's like those do not inherently mean that your politics are going to follow. We would like to think they follow,
Yes.
but not necessarily.
So the
Not
personal, oh,
Go on.
the
No, no.
personal is political, but it's not. But we used to think that it just magically happened. That was what
Yes.
we were taught by the second wave, that it just happened, that they would all just sit there with consciousness groups and have aha moments. No,
No.
you need to, well, because remember, you and I, you know, we would talk about, you know, how, you know, white gay people would look at Black straight people and be like, they should know better. And then Black straight
Yes.
people would look at white gay people and say, well, they should know better and stuff like that. And we were like, yeah, that doesn't happen. Like, no, it just, being oppressed just means you're oppressed. It doesn't make you better. It doesn't make you understand. Now, it
Yes.
can lend you to being more understanding, or it also could make you right wing, because you could be like, you know what? It could make you right wing because you could be like, guess what? Fuck that. No one's ever going to screw with me. I have
Yes.
one word for Israel.
Israel, and also the leader of the Proud Boys. I forgot his name, but I ain't gonna even mention his name, but
Or
he
even,
was
or even
he
look
was
at the
speaking
American
there.
descendants, the ADOS people, the American descendants of slavery. You know,
Yep.
there are some Black folks who become very nationalist because of that bit. And from their perspective, I totally get it. They're like, we built this country.
Right.
I don't care. Why should I care about immigrants? Like, we've been here. We need to like, I get it. Just like I understand the thinking behind Israel.
I
You
do
know,
too. However, that doesn't give you the right to oppress Palestinians.
or or to hate on immigrants. And because you and I know that
Yep.
ultimately that's not going to keep you safe. And it's actually
It's,
really not going to help you, because you and I
yeah.
know, and I think maybe we can end with this.
Okay.
I know this is just a really deep thing. So if you don't want
Right.
to, it's just the whole, like,
No, no,
I'm
no.
just,
Let's keep
you're like,
going because I think
all
it
of a
all
sudden I
ties
was
back
like,
into
oh, this is kind of, it's the whole,
because I think it ties into what we're talking about.
yeah, it's the World War II theo theologian who said, you know, first they came for the
Ah, yes,
communists.
Niemöller, father,
Yes. So, you
father
know,
Niemöller.
so that's where I was going. Like, I'm sorry, I was thinking I was deep for a moment. And I was like, oh, this is a perfect ending. Because it's like that, you know, like we kind of figured out, like, and then no one spoke for me because there was no one left. So I
Right.
think that's where, like,
Right. Because I kept quiet because it wasn't my struggle.
exactly. Or I
And
was so mad about me, like, why not me? Why not me? And we didn't see the biggest, you know,
it's a bigger picture.
and you know, in my discipline in social justice education, we used to call it enlightened self-interest.
Yes, I've heard
It's
that.
about, it's an enlightened self-interest. It's saying, like, for me, like, I am a feminist as a man because it actually makes me free as a man. I actually
Yes.
get my white friends who, like, get it that they are not free as white people. Actually, yes, they get
Right.
privileges, but they're
It's a
White
golden
people are
cage.
not free. James
Right.
Baldwin knew that. White people are not free. White people
No.
are miserable.
Yes. You know,
Are
it's a golden,
miserable.
it's a gilded cage. It's a gilded cage. However, what the right wing has weaponized is saying, yes, you are in this cage, but your cage is better than those Negroes and those colored folks and those other minoritized people. So therefore, you're fine.
Yep.
That's the lie. And that's even the bigger lie that they have fed to white people for so long.
Yep.
And so that was why when Clarence Thomas and Anita Hill came before those white senators, and and specifically when Clarence Thomas was able to weaponize the history of black folks being lynched, they couldn't say anything because they themselves didn't have to consider. They did not have to consider, and that's part of having privilege and also having that latch to white supremacy. As a white person, you don't have to consider other people's lived experiences, other people's intellect, other people's scholarship, none of it. And when you do consider it, it's always considered in your terms. Thus, here's Anita Hill, as we were saying, doing all of this emotional and intellectual labor to make you understand something so simple as, I don't want this Negro harassing me. I didn't want it then, and I don't want him doing it now. And if you sit him on the Supreme Court, he's going to judge on policies and laws that are going to allow
Mhm.
same old,
Yep.
and I'm going to do my part to stop it.
Yep. Exactly.
So that's on that note. Unless we have something else we want to say.
We don't, but Andrea, this is our third one, and I always love these. I always feel so like, oh yes, and especially we knew this one because 30 years, and as we talk about all of these things that really did impact us, and thinking about like
Yes.
where we were then and how we saw it then and how we see it now, and that
Yeah.
has been really fascinating. Kind of like how we've grown, like how differently I see it now. Like I'm
Yes.
like, oh, because I can just picture you mad, just walking around mad, being like,
I, but I was
I mean, we were 22. I was mad too. I was mad. I was cussing everyone out. I was just mad all the time.
right, mad and just wanted to change the world. That's all I wanted to do. And I almost made myself sick. I got mono because I was trying to be part of all of these organizations and the
Yep.
women for women, and I was going to march over here and do all that. Ran my ass into the ground and got mono, and my body was
Yep.
like, "Heifer, if you do not
Yep.
sit your ass down, I'm gonna sit you down for you." And I got it. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Well,
So
I also think about maybe we can talk about in future is also when we got when we sat our ass down, but also maybe when we got a little bit more cynical, because also in '91 was when I was part of the left, like I was part of like
yes.
the Young Socialists, but
Yep.
then I kind of got a little cynical of like white lefties.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can
Let's
talk
talk
a lot
about
about
our
the white left.
yes, and maybe just the idea of our cynicism around about our overcoming. We shall overcome the cynicism of we shall racially overcome. Yeah, I think that might be that'll be definitely a future
Well,
a
and
future
I think I mean we have so much to talk about. Remember, we were the generation where like Malcolm was better than Martin, and because Martin had been so just
sanitized and
sanitized, and we didn't
almost whitewashed.
understand. It really was. It was because and like how I mean, I remember when Black Lives Matters came out, and people were saying, that more people support Black Lives Matters than white people than supported Dr. King. And it was like, so
Mm.
it's like, so I want us to talk about so maybe we could talk about how we saw Dr. King back then and how we see him now.
And now, yes,
Because it's
yes,
very, very different. It's very,
very.
very different.
There's a lot of recuperation of
Yes.
his image for us
Yeah,
um as
exactly.
people of color. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. And
Yep.
even Malcolm, how we understand, there were
Yep.
things that, yeah, he sounded really good, but like the house Negro versus the field Negro. Well, that actually wasn't necessarily true because you know what? The house Negro actually could have been, like the
As the
house, like
house Negro, a lot
they
of
were
times was like,
closer. So in many ways, they could have been angrier.
right, and they were also double agents. How many stories have we heard
Right.
in history where it was the house Negro that was the one that started the fire of the plantation, or that it was the house Negro that poisoned the family and
Right.
actually gave all of this intel to the field Negroes. And this is when we're going to uprise. This time, I'm gonna
Yeah.
set the house on
Yeah.
fire. You go over here. So there was
Yeah.
all of that too.
Yeah.
But that also
And
got
he
him.
had his own color stuff too. I mean, look at
Yeah,
he
he
was so
did.
fair. So we can unpack that from a place of love.
From a
From
place
a
of
place of
love.
love. We now know that, our folks that I think we should do that with lots of people. Like how we see like bell hooks then.
Yeah, and bell hooks
Bell hooks
now.
now. Ooh, and she called
Clarence Thomas then, not Clarence Thomas, but Cornel West then, Cornel West now. All of those.
okay, on that note.
On that note, um, let me say that I want to add one more thing. Is that what I find interesting, back to Anita Hill, is that because of Anita Hill and the work that she has done, we can see her legacy even right now into the Me Too movement.
Yes. Yes. Oh,
And because the Me Too movement started around this time too.
yes. So,
So,
so one of the things I think what's so important, Andrea, you're so right. So I would tell people she actually just came out with a book, Anita
yes,
Hill, about
leaving.
the 30 years of working on gender violence.
Uh-huh.
And she started that. I mean, she really did. So, this quiet, unassuming, small C conservative woman from Oklahoma who didn't really want to be in the spotlight really started
But knew
this.
she knew she had to speak up. Let least this man became um did this kind of did the same damage that he did to her on a national and legalistic scale.
Right.
That's what he understood.
And he did. And what's
He did.
interesting is all of those people who went supporting him then, they're all real quiet now
They're
because
real
they've
quiet.
seen the damage. They've
Yeah.
seen the damage that he's done.
Yeah. They were part of the damage. And some have recanted, like we said, David Brock was one of them. Um, and you're also seeing the children of Anita Hill. Like I said, with Me Too, there was a 20-year of the documentary talks about the 20-year anniversary where there was this big gathering at Hunter College. And we all basically gave, because I was there too, we all basically gave Anita Hill her flowers right there and just be like, sis, thank you so, 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 so much for what you did. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So with that, this is the third episode of Between Apartheid and John Hughes. I'm Andrea Platt, and this is my bro love.
Chris McDonald Dennis.
And thank you for listening to this podcast. We know it was long, but as you can tell, we love to talk to each other about so many things. And we
Yes.
hope that you enjoy this, and we'll talk to you next time. Take care,
Yes.
everybody.
Bye bye, everyone.
All right.